welcome back. Today we're here to talk about 1981's Superman 2. So we're going to start off, as always, by talking about the story and the plot line. And right off the bat, this thing is loaded. This movie is loaded with a lot going on. This is the first superhero movie that we watched that I've been like, they should have cut some things out of this.
Yeah.
You got Lex Luthor, who is breaking out of prison and discovering where the Fortress of Solitude is. You got a little Lois Superman love thing going on where she's trying to figure out who Superman is. And then you got the General Zod escaping from his prison and them kind of invading Earth and learning they're powerful and taking over. And all of it is just so packed that the transitions between each plot point is really choppy. That was the first thing I noticed.
I definitely agree. I also feel like some of the more important things where you could have taken it a little further didn't get enough time because there's too much going on. When Superman loses his powers, that could have been a really good long scene about him getting to know himself. Is he more than just Superman, or is he just this flying being? And we come to find out, we don't know. He's probably just this flying being because as soon as he loses his powers, within like 10 minutes, he's got them back.
Yeah. I wasn't a huge fan of how much they got. In fact, I felt like if they could have cut out Lex Luthor's stuff totally and been fine. Because
100% agree.
the thing about it is, he didn't really have anything to do. The character Lex Luthor didn't have anything to do.
Except for show Zod.
Until the end, until he showed Zod. And they could have easily found a way to help Zod find out where the Fortress of Solitude is without Lex Luthor being there. Yeah. And that would have made it flow a lot more smoothly.
I think they took it because he's one of the better known characters, and B, because he's one of the more likable characters in this movie.
Yes.
We'll talk about characters a little bit later, but it was just kind of weak. And as far as story goes, Lex Luthor was very weak in this movie. He didn't have any ambitions. He didn't aspire to be anything. He wasn't even looking to be a billionaire in this one. I guess he wanted to have Australia, but his whole thing was like, I want to be a criminal. Like a good villain does not want to just be a criminal.
Yeah. None of that really worked for me. They could have cut that out, and it would have made the transitions smoother, probably, and they've been less packed. Overall, I would say that the way that they told the story is a little bit more intense than the first one was. But I would also say is that it didn't really grip me like I think they wanted it to. Like it was good, and I did enjoy it more than I enjoyed the first one, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I do want to make that clear. I actually did enjoy this movie. We're picking apart flaws because that's what critics do, but at the end of the day, I enjoyed sitting down. I enjoyed watching this movie. There wasn't a 48-minute segment of this movie that I didn't enjoy, which makes it better than the first one. I thought that it was more fun to watch. There was more action, although we'll talk about
the action in a minute too.
But yes, I did enjoy this movie.
Yeah, so honestly, I can't give the story and plot that big. I gave it a 2 out of 5. It was entertaining enough, and like Ben said, there wasn't a whole 48-minute straight of me not liking it like there was with the first one. But I did notice how choppy it was, and it kind of took me out of the movie a little bit, and it just felt a little too overstuffed was the biggest issues I had with it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also gave it a 2 out of 5. Same basic reasoning. There's also just a few things like the only way to free Zod was to throw a nuclear bomb into space, and that's what Superman did, despite the fact that presumably he's watched all of these videos in that 12-year time that he was growing up. So he knew he shouldn't be throwing nuclear bombs into space.
He didn't know that they were going to be flying past him at the time, but you're right. It was a kind of a dumb thing to do and kind of a dumb loophole for them to be able to escape in. I agree with that. Yeah. But
so a total of 2 out of 5 for both of us.
2 out of 5 for both of us for story and plot.
I believe this is your floor.
Okay. Moving into acting. The acting in this movie was pretty bad. I will say, the best part of both of these movies so far has been Christopher Reeve.
He's great.
By far. He's a likable guy. I really enjoy him as Superman. He fits the role very well. Other than him, and maybe Lex Luthor, nobody else really fits the part.
No, and what I will say is, I don't necessarily blame the actors completely. The extras are really bad. The extras are really bad in this one. But, for example, my issue with this movie mostly was the direction they went with a lot of the characters. Lois Lane in particular is really annoying in this movie. The first one, she was kind of fun. She was kind of okay. But in the second one, she's just so selfish and needy and annoying, and it just she becomes a very unlikable person. And what really drove me crazy is the scene when Superman does lose his powers. That's a good moment for the character of Superman, because to me that shows that he has a little bit of a selfish streak in him, because he wants to be with his girl. He doesn't want to have to go save the world anymore.
Yep.
But that moment did not work for me for Lois, because as soon as he loses his power, you can tell
she loses her interest.
Lois doesn't care anymore. She wasn't even in love with Superman. She was obsessed with Superman.
Yeah.
And when he was no longer Superman, you can see in her face she doesn't like it anymore. Like, she's like willing to give it a try, but if they had gone on, she probably wouldn't have stuck with him, just because that's not he's not who she fell in love with. She fell in love with Superman, not Clark Kent.
Yeah.
So that does not make me like Lois, does not make me feel empathetic for Lois. I also didn't like that Superman seemed like he was only saving her. Like everything in the movie, when there was bad things happening, the very opening scene, there's like a bomb going off in Paris, or a terrorist threatening to blow up a bomb in Paris. And he goes because he finds out Lois is there.
He was concerned before that, but he didn't decide to change the course of history until he found out that Lois was
right, yeah.
Or at least that's what it seemed like.
That's what it seemed like. I mean, he may have gone anyway. He probably would have. But, it just seemed like he was there for Lois. And everything he did was centered on Lois. And I didn't like that so much.
Yeah. I mean, I get he's supposed to be like the guardian of Metropolis, but at some point when you're Superman, you also have to be guardian of the world. And he didn't feel like that. He just felt like guardian of Lois Lane. As far as the other characters go, with the exception of the extras, like, they did pretty well. I do want to say with our 3 Kryptonians that are not Superman, very boring.
Yeah.
Just I think that they were doing it on purpose, very robotic. Oh, I'm here to conquer the world, and it was just a little boring. It wasn't fun to watch.
That's what I was going to say, is their scenes by far are the most action-packed scenes in the movie, but even though they had the most action, I was still bored during their scenes, and I think a lot of it had to do with robotic acting on all their parts. And like Ben said, it seemed intentional because all 3 of them were doing it.
Yes.
So it's not like just one of them. It's not like just Terrence Stamp was doing it for General Zod. He was doing it, and so was his girl, who I don't even remember her name, Ursa or something like that. And then the silent dude. They were all being very robotic.
I will say I like the silent dude.
Yeah.
He had a little bit more animation, which is kind of obnoxious to say because he couldn't speak.
Right.
But he was still the most fun of the 3 to watch.
Yeah, which might have saved him, actually, by
not
not talking. Because if he had talked, they would have had him do the same thing. So, to me, again, that's not necessarily the actor's fault, because it seems like that's something the director told them to do. And so they're good at following directions. But I don't like the characters. I don't like what they did with the characters. Like I said, Lex Luthor, Gene Hackman was still good, but he didn't need to be there. And it was clear he didn't need to be there. So, to me, the acting characters took a big hit just because of the direction they went with the characters in this movie. I wasn't a fan of. I gave it I gave it a 2 as well on acting and characters. I didn't really 2.5 actually. Yeah. 2.5.
I also gave it a 2.5 because Christopher Reeves is good enough that I didn't want to dock the whole movie.
Yeah.
I will also say we're gonna get into this in action, but there is a scene that was entirely made for the extras, which was entirely unnecessary because the extras are awful in this movie. With the exception of the guy who owns the Daily Planet. He's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like him.
But for the most part, just hard to watch.
Yeah.
I win! I always win. Is there no one on this planet to even challenge me?
Moving on to the action sequences, and Ben already brought this up. There's a lot of action in it. There's a lot more action in it than the first one, but they're not particularly interesting action sequences to me. One of them is actually straight bad. I'll let Ben talk about it because he's pretty passionate about it.
I'm very passionate about it.
But I just, there's a lot of the Superman and General Zod fight at the very end. That battle was a little bit much. It didn't really work so well for me. But even before that shows up, General Zod, every time that he shows up on screen, people are trying to fight him. There's like a lot of missiles being launched at him, and he's kind of toying with the army a little bit, blowing them all around. And to me, I mean, it's there, it's actiony, but it's not interesting because nothing they do is going to affect them, and we know that. And so to me, it's just a bunch of explosions with no real substance to it,
Yeah, it was very redundant. However many times they shot missiles at him, and he just snapped him over his knee, or however many times they shot him with a gun and the bullets fell on the ground, or how many times he shot lasers at things. Oh, that was another thing. All of a sudden, Superman could shoot lasers and have ice breath and reverse people. All of a sudden, he just had lots of powers, multiply himself, throw his symbol at people.
Yeah, that was weird.
Just weird action sequences. And I will say, I actually found most of that pretty enjoyable. The part that I think. Well, okay, there's two parts in this scene. It's not the very last time that they all fight in the Fortress of Solitude. It's actually when they're fighting in Metropolis. There was one part of that action sequence that I imagine would have been really cool had we seen it. And that's when Superman and one of the goons are fighting underneath the ground. And you just see like explosions and you see like the ground moving and then all of a sudden you see one of them fly up. It's not Superman, it's one of the goons flies up. And it could have been a really cool scene. I wish that we had seen it.
Yeah.
But the scene that I want to talk about is the scene where General Zod and his two goons are blowing air. Just we timed it. We paused the movie, rewinded it, and timed it. It's 2 minutes and 32 seconds of them standing here and blowing. Yes. I wish I was exaggerating.
No.
I'm not. I mean, honestly, if you think about it, this is like a 2-hour movie. That's like 1%. That's like maybe 2.5% of this movie was them blowing.
Just them blowing.
But I do want to talk about the fact that this was just made for the extras, because they were just like, my thought is that this scene was supposed to be like 30 seconds, maybe, but then the extras were just having too much fun. They're like, well, what if I was a clown and juggling when he started to blow? Or what if I was on an angry phone call? and then it just keeps going. And you see like 100 situations. And first of all, you're like, I get that these are Kryptonians, they have strong breath, but how big are their lungs? And then at the second point, you're just like, at what point is Superman going to crawl from behind this bus and put a stop to the scene and put us all out of our misery? And then eventually you're just like, well, could they go longer? You know, like
they do.
Yeah. You're like, well, what if this was the whole movie? Because it kind of feels like it is.
It feels like a good chunk.
So, yeah, I mean, I will tell you, I would pay money to watch a movie where the whole thing was Zod blowing and just extras flying in the distance. I would pay money for that. I really would. I might have just as much fun as I had watching this movie.
Oh, gosh. No, it was terrible. And what Ben said is, the funny thing is, you're waiting for Superman to get out from behind the bus to stop them, but he doesn't stop them. He flies away.
He does.
He gets out and he just flies away. And I think he wanted them to follow him because
you assume so.
He had a plan for the moon that he was in the Fortress of Solitude. But then, if he did have the plan, he didn't like make that obvious at any point.
He didn't say like, "Come follow me."
He's like, "Zod, come get me," or something like that. He flies away and hopes that they follow. Because if they didn't follow,
yeah, what if they had just been like, "Well, I guess Metropolis is ours."
Right? No, and like they didn't know where he lived either. In fact, they didn't follow him. Lex Luthor had to come and show him where it is. So, like that plan could have gone really wrong. So yeah, that scene in general, and they didn't really. The other thing I'll talk about the cinematics a little bit, but that scene also didn't really work for me because they tried to do something they didn't quite have the technology for yet. It felt like, I don't know, I feel like that scene was a little bit much on just the catastrophes and things like that. It didn't look very good when they were doing it.
Yeah, that didn't bother me too much. I hear what you're saying, but I was just like, it's dated. But
yeah,
the thing that bothered me was just the sheer amount of time
they
spent doing it.
For sure.
If you can say any percentage, and it's like higher than 1% of a movie is people blowing, you need to reconsider that scene.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't even that cool to look at. So...
No, it really wasn't. Out of all the things that happened in the movie that were like fun to look at, that was probably the lowest.
Yeah.
And I'm putting that below Lego Krypton, which you see again in the beginning.
That was really bad. Yeah, it was still really bad. Yeah, for me, I gave it a 3 out of 5 for action. It was good in that there was a lot of it and it kept things going. There was just like the blowing scene or just the fact that it was kind of repetitive, redundant. It just wasn't like memorable action for me, but there was a lot of it, and it did make the movie much more fast-paced and interesting to watch than the first one was for me. So I did give it a 3 out of 5 on the action. And
we're actually agreeing a lot on this movie. I also gave it a 3 out of 5 on the action. It was just, there was a few scenes that were not great to look at, but as a whole, it was fun. The action was fun. They did things, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Cinematics of this movie were okay. I didn't hate them. I thought once again first of all, like transitions in general are pretty choppy, and that's not just the story. That's like the way that they handled it.
Yeah.
It's just like being one thing, and then all of a sudden you were in another thing with like very little transition material.
For not very long either.
Yeah. And for not very long. The cuts are getting a little bit shorter than they used to be. I mean, they still had some pretty long cuts. The CGI is old fashioned. I will say that the last battle in the Fortress of Solitude when there was multiple of Superman. Not like cinematically brilliant, but I thought it was fun and I enjoyed it. And then the last kind of point that I wanted to make with cinematics, this is going to be really short from me, is the the scene where Superman gives up his powers and he's just Clark Kent. It was kind of, I mean, it's old, but I mean, it was really kind of cool. You had like Superman looking himself in the mirror, and then Superman walks away and leaves Clark Kent.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was a really cool thing to do, like to symbolize, like, okay, I'm walking away from this. I'm no longer the hero that the world has seen me for all this time. I'm just Clark Kent, the reporter.
Yeah, no, there were some cool things that they did. I think for me, cinematically, the word I would use to describe it is it was just big. They tried to make it a lot bigger than the first one was. They were traveling a lot more. They were covering a lot more ground. He was in Paris. He was in Metropolis. He was in like a jungle of some kind at some point. Forest of Solitude, North Pole type of thing. Like the geographically was a lot bigger, and what they were trying to do with some of the effects were a lot bigger. It seemed a lot bigger than what they were doing with the first one. And I did enjoy that about the movie. It did make it feel more like a normal superhero movie than the first one did, just because it was trying to be bigger in scope. And I think it did work for the most part. Like I said, some of it probably tried to be a little too big for its time, but most of it I actually did enjoy. I gave the cinematics a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I gave it a 2.5. It felt pretty average to me. I will say, with superheroes like Batman, you can afford to have a smaller scope. You know, it's just Batman in Gotham. But with superheroes like Superman, the scope can be as big as you want it.
Yeah.
And so I enjoyed that they made it a little bit bigger. I will say that it always looks the best in the Forest of Solitude. I don't know why. I don't know why that's when it looks the best. That's when Superman's colors stand out the most. That's when, you know, you don't need to be too clever with what's in your background, so you don't have like terrible extras ruining the movie for you. So it was just Superman in his Fortress of Solitude, sometimes with Lois Lane, sometimes with the Three Goons or whatever. But I enjoyed it. I gave it a 2.5.
Yeah, they were decent.
Well, I've been working out.
As far as entertainment goes, this movie was more entertaining than the first one. I would definitely say that. I didn't get super invested in it, and I also probably wouldn't rewatch it anytime soon. But there was a lot more going for it. It was like, I saw this one as a kid too, and this one definitely stuck out to me more as a kid, and it still does. There's just, I don't know, there's more to it that feels enjoyable to watch than the first one was. And granted, the first 48 minutes aren't terrible like the first one is, so that might have something to do with it.
Sure it does.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I modestly entertained. I could rewatch this one. I would need a little bit of time to do it, but I could rewatch it. I gave it entertainment-wise, I gave it a 3 out of 5.
I thought that this movie was the most entertaining movie that we've seen so far. I think I could watch it the soonest out of the 3 that we've watched, and I don't know, I enjoyed Christopher Reeves enough as Superman that I could probably watch this movie again like next week. You know, I can't say that I'd watch it every day for a year, but I can say that I could watch it again. I'm gonna have to give it a 3.5 out of 5.
Sounds good. So actually, we were, like you could probably tell, we were actually quite on par with our rating on this one. And so when we averaged our scores together, actually we got the same score exactly, and it was a 2.7.
Yep, that's correct.
So we gave it a 2.7 out of 5. It's quite a bit higher than the first one was, but it's still in the 2 range. Still a decent movie.
Yeah.
But
my guess is as we progress through this series, we're going to see a lot higher scores as movies progressively get better. But not just that, as superhero movies get better.
Yeah.
When we judged these movies, superhero movies were not popular yet. They weren't in the limelight. And really, until Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, superhero movies were never really in the limelight.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we have, you know, movies like Superman 2 that are scoring even a 2.7 is actually pretty good.
It's pretty good, yeah. It is pretty good. Now, I'm not so sure our ratings of the rest of the Superman movies will be quite as high, but we'll find out. We've actually never seen this next one they're going to be doing, which is Superman 3. I've never seen it. I think he may have seen parts of it. But
I think I've seen parts of it, but it's been long enough that I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, so we'll tune in next time after we do 1984 Superman 3. See you later.